Ali, after working late, just returned home, only to be struck by darkness and unexpectedly die from a sudden heart attack. Even Ali never thought she would die so casually. However, seeing her pitiable fate, the gods decided to grant Ali a second life and bestow upon her a special ability. She was then reborn into another world. At this moment, a magical trial was taking place in this new world, and Ali found herself standing in front of a giant dragon. When others saw the dragon, they instinctively ran away. But Ali, instead of running, approached the dragon. She knew the dragon wouldn't harm her because the power the gods had granted her was the ability to gain the affection of all animals, except for humans. As she gazed at the dragon's scales, Ali was tempted to touch them. The dragon, surprised that this human girl wasn't afraid of it, bent down to let her touch its scales. The soldiers watching from a distance were terrified and almost attacked. Fortunately, they were stopped by the prince, who knew about Ali's ability. Ali didn't expect the dragon's scales to be both cold and slippery, but they felt pleasant to the touch. The dragon then offered to form a contract with Ali if she ever needed it, and gave her a red gemstone. This gemstone would allow them to stay connected, and it could also change its shape. To make it easier to carry, Ali turned it into a backpack. Before leaving, the dragon told Ali that she could use its power through the gemstone, but this was not necessarily a good thing for Ali. With such great power, people would start to target her. Soon after, Ali and her family were summoned by the king. Many influential officials had gathered, and the king was concerned that Ali might pose a threat to the kingdom. Ali's father immediately swore that Ali would never pose a danger to the nation, and the king believed him. At that moment, a mage spoke up, saying that ordinary mages would never be able to summon a dragon. The dragon's appearance was most likely the will of the gods. At this time, the prince noticed that Ali seemed bored and asked her to play with the white tiger. To everyone's surprise, Ali directly fed the white tiger with her hand and even lay down on its back to sleep. Ali's father was very happy to see this, but the surrounding ministers began to suspect that Ali was no ordinary person. They began discussing how to keep an eye on her. Fortunately, Ali's parents were eloquent, and in the end, the ministers agreed that Ali's abilities were a divine will. The king then declared that Ali could freely come and go from the palace and mentioned that the palace housed many animals, such as little dragons. He called a servant to take Ali to visit the dragon stables. However, the servant complained non-stop during the journey because he didn't get along with the dragon stable manager. The two immediately started arguing upon meeting, but this time, Ali interrupted them. She said that she wanted to touch a dragon, which stunned both men. The manager of the dragon stables explained that she could only look, not touch, because even her head wouldn't be enough for the dragons to eat. The stables were not just a prairie but also included deserts and lakes, all controlled by magic, so the climate could be adjusted at any time. Ali was puzzled, wondering how the animals wouldn't escape, but this was no problem. All the dragons were contracted, so they wouldn't leave. Looking at the many little dragons, Ali was eager to touch them but held herself back. Unfortunately, the magic of the great dragon came out, and in the next moment, all the dragons gathered around her. The dragon stable manager, seeing this, wanted to escape with Ali, but Ali stepped forward and began communicating with the dragons, even successfully petting a little dragon. The next moment, Ali climbed onto the little dragon's back, and it took off into the sky. With the gemstone from the great dragon, Ali could communicate with the dragons. The leader of the dragons also sensed that Ali was chosen by the great dragon as their master. All the dragons welcomed her with open arms. Thus, Ali became friends with the little dragons. The stable manager was completely stunned because he had raised these little dragons for so long, and none of them had been this friendly with him, let alone let anyone ride on their backs. The servant then informed him about Ali's connection with the great dragon, and he understood the reason. With the gemstone, Ali could naturally communicate with the dragons. Just then, Ali returned, riding on a tiger with several little dragons following her. Both men were left speechless, their jaws nearly